All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're really going to pull back the curtain on REDD+, the international framework for forest-based climate action. And we're not just scratching the surface. We're going to take a pretty technical look at its architecture, specifically how performance is actually measured to unlock that all-important climate finance. When you boil it all down, this is the fundamental challenge that REDD+ was designed to solve. We all know forests are absolutely critical for the climate, but the real question is, how do you create a global system that can actually tip the economic balance? How do you make a living, breathing forest more valuable than a cleared one? And look, this isn't just some philosophical question, it's an accounting one. And that is what this whole framework is really about. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basics of REDD+ under the International Climate Convention. Then we'll look at the 4 key things that countries have to have in place. From there, we'll do a deep dive into the performance benchmark itself, how it's built, how it's assessed, and finally, how it all connects to actually trigger payments. Okay, first up, let's anchor ourselves in the foundational framework. It's super important to remember that everything we're about to talk about is built on decisions made under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or as you'll always hear it, the UNFCCC. So what exactly is REDD+? Well, in a nutshell, it's an approach that creates positive incentives. And yeah, that often means financial incentives for developing countries to keep their forests standing and manage them in a sustainable way. It's a mechanism that's designed from the ground up to reward verified climate results that come from the forest sector. Now, the scope of REDD+ is defined by these 5 core activities. It all started with reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation. That was the original REDD. But the plus is so crucial. It adds conservation, sustainable management, and even the enhancement of forest carbon stocks, like through reforestation. And this is what makes the framework so flexible for countries with totally different situations on the ground. Okay, so let's say a country wants to participate. They want to be able to get payments for these activities. What do they actually have to build to be eligible? Well, that brings us to the 4 core requirements. I like to think of these as the 4 pillars of a national REDD+ architecture. First, you need a strategy or an action plan. That's your guiding policy document. Second, you need a national forest monitoring system to actually collect the data. Third, a safeguard information system to report on social and environmental issues. And finally, the big one for our purposes, a forest reference level. This is the performance benchmark we're about to really get into. All right, let's dive into that benchmark. This is where we get to the real technical heart of the whole system. Because think about it, to get paid for results, you first have to clearly define what a result even is. And that is the job of the FRL/FRL. So the Forest Reference Emission Level, or FREL or FRL, is the official benchmark. It's the baseline. It's the line in the sand against which a country's performance is going to be measured. You can think of it as representing the level of emissions that would have probably happened if these new REDD+ actions never took place. And this graph is just a perfect illustration of how it all works. See those blue dots? That's a country's historical emissions over some reference period. The dotted line is the FREL, the benchmark, in this case, just a simple historical average. Now look at the green dots. Those are the actual emissions after the REDD+ actions began. The gap, that difference between the green dots and the benchmark line, that is the performance. Those are the measurable, reportable, verifiable emissions reductions. Now, you might see these 2 different acronyms, FREL and FRL, and wonder, what's the deal? It's a small but actually really important distinction. A FREL, a Forest Reference Emission Level, only covers activities that reduce emissions. But an FRL, a Forest Reference Level, is broader. It can also benchmark activities that increase carbon removals, like a massive reforestation project. This is how those plus activities get officially measured. So how does a country actually build one of these benchmarks? What goes into it? All right, let's get into the real nuts and bolts of constructing a FREL or FRL. Building this benchmark, well, it involves a whole series of key technical decisions. A country has to define the scale. Is this for the whole nation or just one region? They have to define the scope. Which of those 5 REDD+ activities are they including? They need a super clear technical definition of what even counts as a forest. And of course, they need solid historical data. On top of all that, they can even propose adjustments based on their unique national circumstances. And this right here, this is the core calculation at the heart of it all. Greenhouse gas emissions are basically estimated by multiplying 2 key pieces of information. First, you've got activity data. Think of this as the area of change, like how many hectares were deforested.
which you usually get from satellite monitoring. You multiply that by an emission factor, and that's the carbon density, or how much carbon is lost or gained per hectare, which you get from doing on-the-ground inventories.
So this quote really gets at the most crucial point: consistency. The data and the methods you use to monitor your results have to be the exact same as the ones you use to build the benchmark in the first place. It's like you have to use the same ruler to measure both times. If you don't, any results you report might just be an accounting trick, not real performance. Now, once a country has built its benchmark, they can't just start using it. Oh no, it has to be submitted to the UNFCCC for a formal international technical assessment. And this flowchart really shows you just how rigorous that process is. The submission gets reviewed by a team of outside experts in land use and forestry. There are assessment sessions, requests for clarification, draft reports. A country gets to respond. The whole thing can take up to 42 weeks. It really highlights the level of due diligence that goes into this. And this is a really key takeaway. Of those 4 pillars we talked about earlier, the strategy, the monitoring system, the safeguards, and the benchmark, the FREL/FRL is the only one that has to go through this formal, international, technical deep dive. And why is that? Well, because the credibility of any results-based payments hangs entirely on the integrity and the robustness of this benchmark.
Okay, let's put it all together now. How do all these different pieces connect to actually lead to the payoff, that results-based finance?
This final graph really brings it all home. You've got the historical emissions data, you've got the FREL/FRL acting as the projected baseline, and then you have the line showing what actually happened to emissions after the REDD+ actions started. And that green shaded area, that is the goal. That's the prize. It represents the volume of verified emissions reductions that a country can report and hopefully receive payments for. So, to sum it all up, you can see how the whole system just interlocks. A national strategy provides the plan. The National Forest Monitoring System provides the data. That data feeds into a robust, technically assessed FREL/FRL, and measuring performance against that benchmark is what allows a country to demonstrate credible, verified results and finally unlock that international climate finance.
You know, we've just walked through this incredibly detailed technical framework for measurement and accounting. It's a system that's really designed for transparency and credibility. But with that system now in place, the challenge really shifts, doesn't it? It shifts from accounting to action. And this leaves us with a critical question. What policies, what measures on the ground will be powerful enough to actually achieve these results and truly, finally tip the economic balance in favor of keeping our world's forests standing?